Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and my Stay Puft Marshmallow Man cake topper tutorial that I made for an 80s themed cake. So he's made from black and white the modelling paste, and I've used food colours to create the navy and red, and I'll leave a link to everything that I use in this tutorial in the video's description so you can take a closer look later. Okay, so let's begin with the tutorial. So firstly, I'm just going to show you what I've done with the leg, and you can see it's made up of 3 pieces here. I've got the foot and then 2 bits for the leg, and then I've got a toothpick that goes through it. So I've got 2 balls of about 5 grams of white modelling paste, and then I've got a larger one of about 8 grams. I'm just taking one of the 5 grams and forming it into like an oval shape for the foot. I'm just going to take the other 5 gram, I'm just going to form it into a ball and then flatten it slightly. And this is going to go on top of the foot. So you can see I've got the other leg here that I've made earlier, and that's like a reference to make sure I get them the same size. And then I take the bigger one and just do the same thing. So form it into that ball and then flatten it slightly. You may find you need to stick these together with some edible glue or clear alcohol, or your paste might be sticky enough already. So here you can see I've stacked them up. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pop the cocktail sticks through it. Obviously, if you're making this for someone, please do make sure that you let them know that there's cocktail sticks in it. But we need this for strength because it's such a big structure. So there we go. So we just make sure that they are exactly the same size and they're standing upright. So I now let these set for a few hours because they've got to take a lot of weight with the body, arms and head. So it's a good idea to put them to one side and let them set for a few hours or even overnight. Okay, so now we're going to make the body, and I've got about 80 grams of white modelling paste that I've kneaded to a pliable, and I'm just going to form it into a ball shape. And now I'm just going to narrow the top slightly and flatten it a little bit. So the top's obviously where the arms and the head's going to go. There we go. So the bottom's a little bit flat as well for where the legs are going to go. It's a bit like a triangle without the point, I suppose. Okay, so I've got the legs here and I'm just checking for size. So I'm just adding a little bit of glue at the tops of the legs. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop the body on top. And there we go. You want to make sure it's straight. So don't worry if there's too much of a gap like between the legs and the body, because you'll probably find over time the body will sink a little bit into those gaps. Okay, so I'm just going to got my fingers in there where the arms are going to go, just to create a little indent where I'm going to pop those arms. And a little for the head. As I said, make sure it's straight upright, because the more you add, the more chance you've got of him kind of moving backwards or forwards. Okay, so now I've got some red modelling paste. I've got a small piece and I'm just forming it into a little tube shape there. So this is a little tie that goes around his neck. Every time, just keep using my model for, size to make sure I've got the correct length there. You can see where that's going to go. So I'm just going to stick that into position. I've just made that red, and so it's quite sticky, so I didn't need any glue or anything. So just got to flatten the bits either side because you're going to put the blue over the top of that, so you don't want that to make a little ridge. So I'm just using my Dresden tool just to create a few little lines in there to make it look like fabric. And there we go. So you can see here I've got 2 really small balls of the red modelling paste. I'm just going to form them into like little teardrop shapes. Okay, and I'm just going to use a tool. This is my blade tool just to flatten it. So now I've got a flat teardrop shape. So these are like the tails of the ribbon. So I'm just going to pinch the kind of rounded end there. And there we go. And then you can see here, I've just popped these into position. I'm just using a little bit of clear alcohol and my brush just to help tease them into position. There we go. And again, just using my blade tool and my dredging tool just to point the ends a little bit, just to make it a little bit more like fabric. And then just a little small ball, form it into a tiny tube and then flatten it. And then you're just going to coat that around your paste, which is already on your Marshmallow Man. Just use a dry brush, just coats it round and then make a little crease in the middle for fabric. Okay, so now we're going to start making the arms, and I've got 2 8-gram balls of white modelling paste and 2 5. First of all, I've got an 8-gram and I've just formed it into like a flat circle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same with the other one, just so we make sure we've got the same size. So this is the upper part of both arms. So if you do this first, you'll know that you've got the same size for each one. So I'm happy with that, so I'm just adding a little bit of glue to either side of my Marshmallow Man. You can see I'm using a glass for support so it doesn't fall backwards. And then I'm just going to stick those into position. Just going to show you that there. And now I'm just making the lower part just a little bit thinner. Hope you can see that. And then we're going to do the same with the smaller balls, the 5-gram balls. So just form them into like a flat circle. Probably more like a flat tube, I suppose you could say. But again, make sure they're the same size. They're going to squish once you add the hands anyway. They do look like marshmallows, don't they? And then we're just going to stick those into position. Because of where they are, you might have to hold them slightly and for them to adhere. There we go. Alright then. So now we're going to do the navy thing that he wears around his neck. So I've just rolled out some navy modelling paste and I'm just going to use a small circle cutter to cut out a hole where his neck would, or his head would go. He hasn't got a neck. And I've just cut the other side of that, and again I'm checking for size because it goes over the joins of the arm. So first of all I'm just going to cut like a square. You can see I've popped my Marshmallow Man in front of me to make sure I get the right size. And now what I've got to do is I've got to cut off the corners. And I'm just going to use the first one as a guide and a template for the other 3. So there's the third one. And then I'm going to do the last one. Okay. So I'm just going to neaten that off with my blade tool. So now I've just got some white modelling paste that I'm forming into a tube. A very, very thin tube. And this is the line detail. I'm using a cake smoother just to help get it nice and thin and even. So you want it to be long enough to go around the whole of your shape you've just made. So I'm just using a brush with some clear alcohol just to paint where I want this white strip to go. I'm using clear alcohol because it evaporates and it doesn't leave a mark. So now I've just got my dry brush which I'm helping to guide the paste into position there. So I've just needed to add a little bit of more of the clear alcohol to adhere it to the paste. There we go. So we're going to go all the way around. So you want it to join at the back so you can't really see the join on your Marshmallow Man. So I'm just using some scissors just to trim the end off there. I don't want that bit. Neaten the end off where I've snipped it, and then again just trim away the excess, and then just use my brush just to help pop that into position and smooth off the join. I'm just neatening that there, the join, as much as I can before I place it into position on top of my Marshmallow Man. Again, you can use a bit of glue if you need to. So it'll go over the joins of the arms and just neatly and gently mould that around the body. Okay, so I'm just using a ball tool just to create 2 little indents where the hands are going to go at the bottom of the arms there. And that's also squishing that into position. Now just for a little bit of support, I am using a little bit of dried spaghetti. I'm just going to pop that through. You could again use a cocktail stick, but with spaghetti you can actually make it the length that you want. Again, make sure you let the person know that you're making this for, that it's in there. You just need a little bit of support and something to pop those hands onto. So I've left a little bit out, as you can see, so I can pop those hands on. So the hands are made of about 2 grams each of the white modelling paste, and you can see here I'm just kneading it until pliable, forming it into a ball and then into a bit like a teardrop shape. So I'm just flattening that slightly. So when you think of making hands, you want to be aware of your thumbs. So the thumbs are lower on your hands and there's a bigger gap, and we want the thumb to be at the top. So just be mindful of this when you're modelling the hands. I'm just going to cut the thumb here. So you'd cut that a little bit lower than the rest. Snip out a little bit of a V and then just trim the top off. Again, that would be shorter than your fingers. I'm just neatening that with my brush. There we go. So as I said, that one's the thumb, so you can see that that's sticking upright. I hope that makes sense. So now we're just going to snip some V's out for the fingers. Again, we don't cut as down as far as we did for the thumb. So he's got 3 fingers, so we're going to cut 2 little triangles out and then just trim off the top. So 2 V's have been cut out there and you've got your 3 fingers and your 1 thumb. So I'm just going to neaten it with my brush and then just shape the fingers with my fingers. I'm also using a Dresden tool just to make sure I've got a nice cut at the bottom of the fingers there. But mainly it's just my fingers that are just pulling and shaping each of the fingers and the 1 thumb. But as I said, be mindful that you've got that thumb in the right position, because if not, you'd be putting your hand on and the thumb will be downwards rather than upwards. Okay, so now I'm just going to use a ball tool just to press in there to create a palm on the other side of the hand. That'll curve it slightly and give you a bit more of a palm shape. So I'm just going to shape it a little bit more before I just trim the bottom off and then just neaten that bit, and then just use a little bit of glue or clear alcohol just to stick that into position on top of the spaghetti there. And you can see I've already done the other hand, so I'm just shaping them so they all look the same, and you can see the thumbs are upwards. Okay, so now I'm going to make the head, and I've got about 27 grams of the white modelling paste that are formed into a ball and then like a little flat square shape, but still with the rounded edges. Okay, so I'm just using the larger end of a bone tool just to mark in the eyes, which I'm then just going to smooth out with my fingers. So these are like just indents for the eyes, and then the smaller end are going to create the holes for the eyes. So in those I'm just going to pop a ball of white modelling paste each. And now I'm using the larger end of a Dresden tool just to create a smile. You can see I pressed it in and I've got the smile, but I want it to be a bit bigger. So I'm just going to use the tool just to gently eke out either side, and this will help keep the shape but make it bigger. So just left and right, and then maybe down a little bit just to make that a nice bigger smile. Okay, so now I've just flattened 2 small balls of black modelling paste, which I'm going to stick in the eyes. So I'm just going to apply a little bit of clear alcohol and then pop them in the eyes where I want them to be. There we go. And now I'm just using a small ball of the black modelling paste, forming it into a small sausage that's tapered at both ends so I can pop it into the mouth. And then I'm going to use my brush just to gently coat it in there, into the corners. And then use the same tool that I did to make the smile to push it in. And there we go. So now I've got a tiny ball of pink modelling paste that I've formed into a tear shape, flattened it. Just going to take a little bit off the end there. And then I'm just going to pop that into position into the mouth for a tongue. And then I'm going to use the other end of the resin tool just to press down, which puts it into position and gives a little bit of groove in the tongue as well. Okay, there we go. So now I'm just going to check that the head fits on the body okay. Doesn't need to tweak the shape or anything. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a cocktail stick through the body of the Marshmallow Man with enough poking out to pop the head on. You could also use a little glue or clear alcohol here if you needed to as well. So I'm just going to gently insert that onto the cocktail stick and then shape if I need to. And there we go. So lastly, we're going to make the beret. So I've got a small piece of, say, marble shape size of the navy. I formed it into a ball and then I'm just going to flatten it slightly and then just gently move it around in my fingers to make it nice and smooth. Then I've got a slightly bigger piece of the white and again, I've shaped it into a ball, flattened it, and now I'm just using my fingers just to go around the edges and just flatten the edges a little bit. So you get that kind of berry shape, the curved beret shape. There you can see there, I picked it up and I'm doing it again with my thumb and fingers, just moving it around and just thinning the ends there so you get a berry shape. So once I'm happy with that, I'm going to pop the navy underneath and then just make sure that's nice and secure. And I'm just forming a small piece of the red modelling paste into a tube and I'm using a rolling pin to flatten it out. And I'm just going to trim, this is for the ribbon on top of the beret, so I've just trimmed a small bit off there and then cutting a little V out of the bottom or a little triangle. And you can see that's the ribbon for my beret. I want to shorten it a little bit. And again, this is quite sticky, so I'm just going to pop that on there. So it starts at the middle and just tailors off. And I'm just using my blade tool just to shape it a little bit so it looks like it comes in a little bit. And then a small ball of the navy modelling paste popped on the top and then just flattened. And there we go, we've got the beret. So I'm just using my ball tool just to create a little bit of curve in the beret so it sits on the head a little bit better. And use a little bit of glue there to pop it on at a little bit of an angle. You may need to hold it in place a little bit. Just playing with the ribbon a little bit just to give it a little bit of life. And there we go, that is your Marshmallow Man made. I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Please do check out my other ones. Please comment, like and subscribe for more. And hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching.